From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville comes under pressure from Republicans for his blockade of military promotions as top law firms issue a warning to university deans about anti-Semitism on campus. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleagues, editorial board member Kate Batchelder-Odell and columnist Kim Strassel. Tommy Tuberville's military blockade has been going on for months now, with more than 350 military promotions now held up and stuck in the Senate as a protest against the Pentagon's travel policy to cover leave for service members traveling to obtain abortions. But this week, Senator Tuberville faced new pressure from his GOP allies, including Alaska Senator Dan Sullivan. Sullivan said, "We are in a very dangerous world right now. America needs to have our best players, most combat-capable leaders in the field. Right now, that's not happening." Let's start with a clip of Senator Tuberville on the Senate floor Wednesday explaining his strategy and approach here.
I'm not the first person to do this. Holds on nominations happen all the time. Holds on military nominations have happened many times before. Typically, they don't last this long because the administration will work with a senator until the issue is resolved. But that has not happened this time. Zero negotiation. Abortion is the most important thing to the Democrats that they have, and they won't negotiate it.
And here's Florida governor and 2024 presidential candidate Ron DeSantis on Morning Joe on Thursday explaining why he supports Senator Tuberville's actions.
Actually, I think that what the DOD is doing, I don't think they're following the law with respect to the abortion tourism. I don't think taxpayer money should be spent on that. We have a very weak defense industrial base. We've got huge problems with recruiting. And so their focus on that, I don't think it's consistent with the law. I also think it's misguided. I would also point out that you can promote people on an individual basis. I think the Senate has decided they have not wanted to move a lot of those. But if there's people that are mission critical, they can move it in spite of what Senator Tuberville did. But I think fighting back on the Pentagon going outside the boundaries of the law, I think that's Congress's appropriate role for oversight and checks and balances.
Kate, what do you make of this dispute? And give us some more of the details here. I think it's probably surprising to a lot of people who don't have military experience that promotions like this even go through the Senate in the first place.
So this whole standoff does flow from the Biden administration's decision to rewrite its travel policy so that service members could get leave and expenses if they need to travel to another state to obtain an abortion. This was a scorched earth decision that was always going to provoke some kind of showdown with Republicans. As Ron DeSantis said, it is legally dubious given there are several federal prohibitions on public financing of abortion. Legally dubious, politically toxic. And also, just as a note, we've had women serving in Germany and South Korea and other places abroad where abortion laws are much more restrictive than they are in the United States. And so this is not a new issue, and there was certainly no crisis in the force that required the Pentagon to do this. It was simply the Dobbs decision that they did. And on top of that, Republican senators have been asking the Pentagon, okay, so how many people are using this policy? And the best information that we have so far is that 12 people have availed themselves of the policy. So this was just really an unprovoked fight by the White House that serves no ostensible purpose. But on the other side, we now have Tommy Tuberville, who is very much dug in and has put a blanket hold on all promotions. I think this is unsustainable, and I think that for a couple of reasons. One is that Democrats are thinking about changing the rules to overcome him, so he could end up accomplishing nothing other than diluting a senator's power to review individual nominees. But more substantively, I think he is shooting at the wrong target and putting the holds on the wrong people. So who he's holding up now, it's blanket on all military promotions. Some of these folks are, instance, colonels who are putting on 1 stars to be 1-star general. They don't have any influence on the Pentagon's abortion policy. They don't have any power to undo the policy that the Biden administration has done. So they are simply collateral damage in this dispute. So a lot of Republicans have been working behind the scenes for a long time now, for several months now, to convince Tommy Tuberville to narrow his hold and focus on civilian nominees who do set Pentagon policy. one of Biden's nominees right now for Undersecretary of Defense for Policy would be exactly involved in this particular issue. So why not do that? But there has been no ability to convince Senator Tuberville to do that. We can talk more about, is this a force readiness issue? I think that to some extent it's coming to be as it lasts longer. And it also is becoming to be just a huge political loser for Republicans, holding up uniformed officers who can't move, who can't enroll their kids in new schools. And it's become a larger cause on the right about a woke military that is really a real concern, but a separate issue from the Pentagon's abortion policy. It is highlighting the disunity, I think, in the Senate Republican caucus on this issue. On Wednesday night, there was a push by some of Tommy Tuberville's colleagues to get some of these promotions through. And Lindsey Graham, for example, was there, held up a photo of somebody who was supposed to be promoted to lieutenant general and deputy commander of the Pacific Air Forces, said that she had flown thousands of hours, had nothing to do with this Pentagon abortion policy. And then here's a quote from Senator Graham: "You just denied this lady a promotion. You did that." And Kim, what do you make of the idea that Kate is raising here, that the response that Tommy Tuberville may end up getting is a change in the Senate rules that denies him the kind of leverage that he's using right now? And it is not quite clear what that might look like, but there's a Politico story from this week that says Chuck Schumer is backing a proposal to temporarily change chamber rules to allow most military promotions to be confirmed en bloc. That is, with a single vote. And so you could have a rule change as a result of this that takes away the kind of leverage that Tommy Tuberville says he wants to use to get some sort of negotiation going with the Biden administration.
Yeah, I think that's one of the worries, and this would arguably be a consequence of the sweeping nature of what he's doing here. First of all, let's just be clear. Chuck Schumer has been dishonest with the country about the way this process works. Democrats have seen political advantage in suggesting that Tuberville's holds mean that nobody can be promoted. That's not true. What you're dealing with here is that whenever the majority leader wants to bring up either legislation to the floor or some sort of confirmation or promotion vote, he has to ask the chamber, and any one senator has the right to object. If that is the case, then you can still bring that vote up, but you have to go through a lot of formalities, and it can take several days to go through all that and get the vote. And so Schumer's frustration, and the frustration of some Republicans right now, is not that these votes can't happen, but that they eat up a lot of floor time. And so you're now seeing Senator Schumer suggest a rule change that would allow him to bring up all of them at once and sort of push them through together. This is a real worry, I think, for Republicans, every senator, because the prerogative to be able to object is a long-standing Senate privilege. It's something that every senator values deeply. They tend not to use it all the time. In fact, they tend to use it very rarely, but it does give them an option of teeing up an issue, of giving themselves the ability to highlight a problem if they need to. And essentially, Schumer is advocating stripping that away. Now, he will, of course, say that he's doing it only in the context of military promotions. But let me remind everybody that once the Senate goes down a road of changing or stripping away a power of a minority or an individual senator to do something, it usually ends up to be a race to who can go lower. And if you want an example of that, I would just note the dilution of the filibuster. Democrats started that by initially stripping the ability of people to use it for regular judicial appointees. Then it was extended to appellates and Supreme Courts. So it just has a way of all falling apart. So I think there's two sides to this. One, I think it's an incredibly aggressive move of Schumer to threaten to do this. It's essentially blowing up a great big rule. I think it would be a problem for Republicans to go along with that in any way. But the problem is, of course, as I think Kate illustrated, is that Tuberville's refusal to separate out these nominations, for instance, to focus his holds more on civilian nominees to the military rather than fighting men and women, is giving Democrats the ammunition to make the argument for such a rule change.
And it's an interesting argument because Tommy Tuberville has a point that if this policy has been used by only 12 people, I don't understand why the White House or the Pentagon wouldn't call him in and have a conversation about what it would take to break this blockade. On the other hand, Kate, you raised the question of whether and how this is affecting military readiness, especially now as we're eyeing a dangerous world and Iranian proxy attacks on American positions. And it is notable that Senator Tuberville has allowed some nominees through the blockade. So the new commandant of the Marine Corps recently had a heart attack. And on Thursday, there was a confirmation of a new assistant commandant. And Tommy Tuberville said that he would not object to that. So that went through the Senate by unanimous consent. And so, Kate, there have been instances where Senator Tuberville has seen a military need to let a promotion through this blockade that he has put up. But is he wrong that the rest of the people that he's holding up are not creating any sort of real threat or danger to the U.S. military readiness? Or do you think that it really is? And maybe the answer depends on how long this goes on.
I think the threat to the military is more insidious than declining its readiness immediately. And what I mean by that is Congress has been able to move some of the top positions, like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, C.Q. Brown, was confirmed, the chief of naval operations. These high-profile, important leadership positions, they have been able to move some of these. The problem is that there are 350 more that don't attract the same profile and aren't viewed as essential, or you have some people working two jobs or who can't move yet. So the military has not ceased to function or to be ready. Where I do think that there is a concern is the military has an acute retention problem right now and is generally short-staffed in all sorts of communities, from pilots to air defense units. The military has a manning problem. And so my concern would be that over time, folks might say, these nominees might say, you know what, forget about it. Retiring, many of these folks are going from 06, 07, which, colonel to one-star general. They are past 20 years of service already. And so they might say, I could retire and work in private industry, or I could sit around, hopefully promote eventually, and then go deploy or be extremely busy and put all these demands on my family. So my concern more generally is that this does over time could make the military's manning problems worse than it is. So to that point, I think there's an interest in everybody finding an end to it. I think the best, most sensible answer is for the Pentagon to drop the abortion policy that is so polarizing and probably illegal. But the problem is that Democrats think that they are winning on the issue and are bloody-minded enough to keep Republicans in this position. And so my concern is that you don't get the Pentagon to drop the abortion policy, in which case the second best solution would be for Senator Tuberville to find a way to express his dissent in a way that doesn't have all these political downsides. Civilian nominees would be one option there. Taking a vote on the policy as part of an appropriations bill, another option. Those would be the better ways than a rule change. And I would finally say about the rule change, Kim is exactly right that these precedents are a one-way street, and it will only erode a senator's individual power over time if they do a procedural change. Now, Democrats are saying it's temporary, it's an organizing resolution, it's not really a permanent rule change the way that, say, breaking the filibuster would be, but it is still a precedent that eventually will be exploited in ways that are unfortunate. And it also, just as a practical matter, it would mean that, for instance, one of the things that Tommy Tuberville has been very concerned about is the ideological direction of the military, that it is becoming woke. I think senators should have a prerogative to review these military nominees, look at their records, and point out if one or two of them seem unqualified or not fit for the current national security moment. But what we're heading toward is a situation where military nominees can be moved through en masse without a senator being able to draw attention to their qualifications. And so I think that would be just a pure negative, even from what Senator Tuberville says he's trying to accomplish. It would mean less oversight of these military nominees at a really acute moment. So I think this exercise could be really self-defeating, both politically and on the merits, if Senator Tuberville doesn't find a way out of this box canyon.